and welcome back to A Sharper Life. I am your host, Nikki Sharp, a two-time best-selling author, transformation coach, and I am here each and every week to give you actionable tips to help you overcome the challenges that you might be facing in order to find more freedom, more joy, and happiness in life. This podcast is your one-stop shop to help you live your happiest, healthiest, and most vibrant life. Whether we're talking about the best and worst things for your brain, how to overcome an eating disorder or any type of fear of food, and tips to improve your confidence, I got you covered. And yes, those are all past episodes. So if any of those sound good to you, scroll on back through the archives. And if you are new to the show and enjoy it, please be sure to leave a 5-star review and what you enjoyed about this episode, as it helps others to find out about the world-class interviews, including simple and actionable tips to change your life today. So today on this episode, I have Michael Rubino, who is a mold and air quality expert and environmental wellness advocate and founder of HomeCleanse, a revolutionary company with the mighty vision to end the worldwide health epidemic caused by poor air quality and toxic indoor environments. He is also the president of Change the Air Foundation and host of Mold Talks podcast. Michael is a specialist working with people who are immune compromised or have acute or sustained reactions to mold exposure. He has helped thousands of families each year to identify, eradicate, and detoxify their homes using his proprietary, tried and tested HomeCleanse method. And he is an advisor to Hollywood celebrities, athletes, doctors, Fortune 100 CEOs, and medical experts across the country, all about improving your air quality. And I have to tell you, I was blown away by this episode because I learned so much about the quality of the air in my own home. He breaks it down with simple tips to find out if you have mold growing in your house, places that you might not think about. And trust me, you're going to want to listen, because if you are someone who likes your coffee or you use ice, you're going to be shocked and surprised, but he is also giving you a lot of takeaway tips on how to detoxify your home. And I feel like this is such an important topic because it's not talked about often enough. The air quality, mold, and we talk about people who have long COVID, who have colds, or you get sick often, and that this might be caused from the very house that you live in. He is also talking about ways to deal with mold if you have it in your house, and simple tips and tricks to implement today. So I really hope that you enjoy this episode. It is absolutely fascinating. And if you know anyone who has ever dealt with mold exposure, please send this to them, because from myself, I did not know the majority of what Michael says, and I know that you are going to be blown away as well. So without further ado, here is Michael on A Sharper Life. Michael, it is a pleasure to have you on A Sharper Life. So welcome to the show.
Well, thank you so much for having me here.
Absolutely. So I want to jump straight in and talk about our houses, because you are an expert when it comes to mold, to toxins, and I feel like this is something that we don't talk about enough. So can you explain a little bit more of what it is you do and why it isn't so important for people to know about the quality of their homes and the air?
Yeah, so essentially what I do is I help people create healthy environments for them to thrive in. And why it's so important to do that is because one of the biggest missing things with health is the air that we breathe. So for example, the average person takes 20,000 breaths per day. You consume about 2,000 gallons of air, which would be enough air to fill up a normal sized swimming pool. So when we look at it from that perspective, it is really, really important. The amount of air that we're consuming, the amount of breaths that we take, that what we're breathing is really needs to be higher up on the echelon of things that we think about and things that we do in terms of health, longevity, and everything in between.
And what is something that people do not know that you wish that they did when it comes to the quality of air in their houses?
I would say the two main culprits that I see in people's homes are mold and bacteria. And a lot of people don't even realize that they have these issues. I'll give you a really good example. Gywneth Paltrow is one of my clients. Her house was immaculate. I mean, it's like on Better Homes and Gardens level. And we go in there and you don't really see anything obvious. But yet, once you start doing testing, you realize how problematic it was. And she wasn't feeling well. And the results spoke for themselves.
And so, someone like Gwyneth, who obviously has this incredibly healthy lifestyle, where did you find problems with her home? And then what were the remedies for it?
Okay, so every single HVAC system was a problem. It had high levels of mold and bacteria. Why? Because it didn't have the best filtration systems. So these particles like mold and bacteria are extremely small. They bypass standard filters that people get at big box stores. And unfortunately, the evaporator coil, which is what provides our AC, it always condensates. So when these particles get to that coil, there's a source of water there naturally that allows mold and bacteria to start to thrive. And then essentially those, which is the lungs of our home, those systems then become mold factories or bacteria factories and just start creating particles that get all over our house that enter our body with each of those 20,000 breaths that we take. So that was one major problem. Another major problem was one of the main bathtubs that she used very frequently. It was on a wood floor. So every time she got out of the bathtub, you drips get on the floor. Wood can absorb moisture pretty well. And so it was just a flawed design. Looked beautiful, but a flawed design. And over time, toxic mold started growing underneath her bathtub, on the wood floor, underneath the wood floor. And again, it wasn't abundantly obvious, right? It wasn't until we tested it and found where it was, where we realized, okay, this is a big problem. We have to rip this up and then replace it with stone or something that isn't going to hold moisture in the same manner. So those two problems were probably the most severe. And then, of course, other issues and with ice makers and the way certain things were set up that we were able to identify and fix. So I think when it comes to, mold and moisture management, one of the best things that we did for her was upgrade all of her HVAC filtration systems. We removed the wood floor, as nice as it looked, and put something like stone down that isn't going to absorb moisture. And a lot of these different appliances, we made sure that they all were properly cleaned, and there's a proper cleaning protocol in place so that, once a year, these things get cleaned out properly. And there's a lot of things as homeowners that we have in our homes. And, we don't know how to operate them properly or how to clean them properly. And unfortunately, mold and bacteria start to thrive over time.
Interesting. I mean, that's crazy to me that someone like Gwyneth, who probably is testing everything, doing all of that, that even she has mold in her house, which honestly is making me think about my own apartment now, living in Miami, where there's a lot of moisture. And it's like, oh, how interesting. So what are the signs for people to look out for that you might have mold in your house? And what are the symptoms that it causes in the body?
So a couple of the obvious signs are water damage. So we've all seen those like coffee-like stains on our ceilings or walls that are evident that water has come into the place. We see that. We have to remember mold can grow within 24 to 48 hours. So if we see that, we want to act on it immediately, figure out how it's leaking, stop the leak and prevent it from leaking again, and remediate the area properly and remove any mold and bacteria that might have already started to grow. Another really amazing and very free thing that you can do is I find that moldy homes typically have moldy toilet tanks. So everyone should go over to their toilet tank as they're listening to this episode, hit the pause button, take off that lid, flip it over. If you see mold growing on the underside of the lid or you see mold growing in the toilet tank, what it means is that opportunistically there's a good amount of mold in the environment already that's getting into there. And of course, it's a reservoir of water, so it's able to grow. And you'll find that in cleaner homes, and I don't mean clean in this derogatory way, but I mean microbially clean homes, you don't see this problem occurring. Where you do it when there's microbial issues. And so that's a really good free tip and trick that you can go and look at. One of the best ways, really, though, to really see how your air quality is, most people in the past have tested their air, right? It makes sense. You test your air to understand the quality of air. But unfortunately, air testing, the technology itself, it misses a lot. That the best way to screen your house would be to test your dust. And you'll see using PCR technology, the exact specificity and quantification of which you can find is very, very interesting. And luckily, when we do test the dust, there are normal ranges. So we know that we're not going to have a house that has no mold. That's impossible. But we can see if it's in normal ranges. And if it's 10 or 100 or even 1,000 times higher, we know there's a problem somewhere and we got to figure it out.
And when you talk about like testing the dust, so I'm your everyday listener, I'm listening to this. And actually, as you were talking about that, the going to the toilet, I literally want to actually like pause this right now and be like, okay, I'm going to go look at all of my bathrooms after this. But how do you test the dust? Like, is there something on Amazon that you can buy? Is it simple, or you need to have an expert come in?
No. So, I mean, it used to be where you needed an expert to come in, but there's something called the dusttest.com, which literally ships a test to your house. It's got video instructions. It's very easy. It comes with a cloth that you collect dust from randomly across your house, and you send it in. And it's a screening tool. So it's not going to tell you where the problem's coming from. It's just going to tell you if or if not you have a problem, which I think is really the first foundational step in identifying, do I have a healthy home or not? Because a lot of people, they go right to step 2, which is bring in this expert. And you only need that if you identified a problem in step 1. And now you're just giving this person these results to say, hey, help me find where this is coming from. The problem with jumping right to step 2 is because just this whole industry of air quality professionals, the way in which they operate is pretty antiquated. A lot of them, they want to use that air test. They want to take it in the center of the room. And unfortunately, we're going to miss a lot of problems that way. What's one real good thing we learned from COVID? Particles emanate about 3 to 6 feet from the source point. So if I test in the center of a room, and let's say I'm in a living room, I'm probably going to be way more than 3 to 6 feet away from any potential source point, and I'm going to miss stuff. Whereas when you test your dust, you're really just getting an average of what you're being exposed to. And when you see things way above average, that's a really big clue into saying, okay, I think I have a problem here. Now let me bring in this expert to figure out what's going on here. And giving them that data firsthand puts you in the driver's seat, because now you're not asking for their opinion. You're asking them for them to help you find it. And that's where the power really comes into place here.
So for everyone listening, and obviously I'm asking this for myself, what are the signs of mold poisoning? And I ask this because I have a lot of friends, quite a few clients, who kind of jump to that and say, oh, I have mold poisoning. And is that really a thing? Like, that many people have it? Like, are homes fucked basically? Or are there like specific things that you can look for sign wise in your body that this is probably attributed to mold?
Yeah, so our homes effed. Let's talk about that for a second. So the EPA and HUD did a joint study, and they recently did an update, and it's called the Healthy Home Survey. And they did the Healthy Home Survey 1 and 2. And in the second one, what we understood is that the first one was done, I believe, in the 90s. 2006. The first one was done. Okay, they did an update in 2019. What we saw in those 13 years difference is that the mold problem is getting worse inside homes, not better. In 2019, what they showed us is that Urodium was found in 100% of the homes they sampled. Urodium is a type of mold, and that could produce mycotoxins. Aspergillus was found in 97% of the homes. Again, another mycotoxin producing mold. We'll have to obviously get into mycotoxins now that I've mentioned it. And there were several other mold species. Even the Stachybotrys, the toxic black mold we all know and hear much about, was in like almost 40% of homes, right? And so what we're seeing is a large survey of homes that have a history of water damage. And that is definitely a problem. And it seems to coincide with our massive health decline that we've been experiencing. What does mold poisoning look like? Well, first off, every single person is uniquely individual, right? We have different diets and genetics and epigenetics and all that fun stuff. Our bodies are going to respond differently to different things. This is why I believe that medicine needs to go more individualized and personalized medicine, because this whole, let's put people in buckets and let's come up with a drug that works 67% of the time and we're good to go. I don't know that that's going to help us going into the future. With that being said, the common symptoms that you typically see with mold exposure are brain fog, chronic fatigue, skin issues, gut issues, inflammation. It, depending on the type of species of mold that you have, essentially it weakens your immune system so that you become susceptible to pretty much any illness. That's why you'll see with mold, most people, you'll see some sort of autoimmune condition developing in somebody who's in a moldy environment. It's because, again, your immune system is becoming weak, and these other viral infections or bacterial infections have a bigger opportunity to start taking over. And the problem is, as long as you're in that environment, these conditions typically become chronic instead of just something that you experience as a cold and get over. We're seeing a lot of correlation with long COVID and people being in moldy homes where they get COVID and they literally never recover. They have these perpetual COVID symptoms that just won't go away. And when you test their environments, for the people that I know that we've had the opportunity to test, there's lots of mold there. So I think what we're really at this new frontier of understanding how mold and bacteria play a part being in our homes in abundance, and how that's impacting our health, whether it's just I don't feel well today or how that's impacting our longevity. There's a lot there that I think we need to be looking into that we could probably learn from. Because look, human beings, we've evolved into this indoor generation, but we all were cavemen and cavewomen, and we lived outdoors. We have this new way of living inside buildings and stuff because of the energy efficiency push since 1970s, and we're dealing with that energy crisis. And what's happening is the air inside of our homes has no exchange with the outdoors anymore. And so you can do anything. You could fart inside your house, and that fart will stay with you much longer because there's no exchange of air. So think about what happens with all the chemicals we use and the toxins we have, the gas cooking that we do, what happens with the mold and bacteria. Well, I'll tell you what happens. You're going to be breathing in a lot more of it every time you take a breath than you would have 50 years ago. And that's why we're seeing this massive turn of events here, and why I think it's so important that people take a look at this and just test your dust, figure out what's going on with your environment, because it could make a massive difference on your health.
That's really interesting, actually, that you talk about long COVID. I know many people who have had those symptoms for a very long time. And I can even say for myself, like since the pandemic, I've gotten sick a lot more than I ever have. And I am a very healthy person. I teach health for a living. And there was, when I first moved into my apartment, and so I'm in a high rise, I noticed, and I'm on the second floor from the top, and I noticed there was water running down behind the paint, essentially. And it went all the way down to the bottom. And I got very concerned. I was like, okay, should, contact the landlord, and decided to wait, see if that happens. It happened one more time. And then in a year, it hasn't happened since then. So I am curious, in that circumstance, like, did I just screw myself by not having someone come in? Like, could mold be there because of the water, or the fact that it hasn't happened again? Is that should I be concerned?
I would be concerned if I were you, because, earlier on, I told you that mold grows within 24 to 48 hours, right?
Yeah.
That's probably a large portion of mold species. Then you have more of the toxic mold species, the toxigenic ones, that they'll take a little longer, like 3 to 5 days. But here's the problem. That was wet. We don't know how long it took to dry, the average statistic is when something is wet inside of a building, because of the amount of different layers that it has that traps moisture, it could take at least a week to dry. Now, with that being said, there probably is mold there if we were to test it. Now, how much? That's a huge variable, and we wouldn't be able to tell unless we tested it. It then happened a second time, you said, right?
Yeah.
So it had whatever started to grow and now had an opportunity to grow even further because it happened a second time. And then, yeah, they might have fixed whatever the cause of the leak, which is great because you really can't remediate if it's still leaking, right? But we now have very likely a high probability of mold being there that is colonized. And that mold doesn't go away just because you stop the source of the water. You have to still remove it from the structure. And that's one other big misnomer that people have is they think that, well, as long as I stop the water, it just dies off. It doesn't. It'll go dormant. It won't be able to grow as quickly, but it's still there. It's still producing particles. It still could be producing toxins. And so it's definitely something that you'd want to get looked at. And thank you for bringing that up, by the way, because like so many people think that they're like, oh, it hasn't happened. We're good. And you might be, but I always rely on data to really understand and make those decisions.
So now I'm scared, little worried, little nervous. So for someone in my shoes or anyone listening, like I can imagine there's then the immediate thing that comes up, which is like, oh shit, like, do I have mold everywhere in my house? Am I getting sick because of this? So without necessarily going the full-fledged, okay, you're getting the dust thing and then maybe you're having the expert come in. What are some tips that people can do? Like, what could I do? Like, should I start just opening my windows every day, for example? Would that help? Or are there other things that would help either prevent it from happening, or let's say there is mold that I don't know, from it wreaking havoc on my immune system?
So the scientific community has this little phrase: if you can't remove it, dilute it, right? And so if you open windows and bring fresh air in, you're going to dilute the amount of, particles per breath because you have more air coming in, exchanging and moving those particles around. So dilution would be a sound strategy from right now until you either A, get peace of mind and know that there's not a problem there, or B, if you find a problem, you show it to your landlord and say, hey, come and remediate this, right? It's in your best interest as a tenant to understand the environment that you're in and present that to the landlord, because you want them to fix it and you want to make sure it's fixed right. And odds are, they probably had the same thought that you just had, which was, oh, it stopped, so it's probably not an issue, right? And so from a societal standpoint, we have known so little about mold and bacteria and water damage that we haven't made the best choices over the past 100 years. We just haven't. And so, for a lot of people, most of the people that come to me that are really sick, they're living in homes that have a multitude of issues, and we have to basically undo 50 years worth of stuff all in one fell swoop to create them a healthy environment, right? So in your case, you had one incident, yes, or two incidents really in the same location. There's probably some mold there. I don't know that you need to panic right now because we have no understanding of what the impact was, what species are there, et cetera. But I think it's definitely important to be vigilant, right? And as a matter of fact, we're going to make sure we get you a dust test shipped to your house, so that you can get this data and maybe potentially have a part 2 about it.
Yeah, amazing. It is very just like such a fascinating topic because even someone like me, I don't know a lot about this. And my initial thought would be, okay, well, mold happens when it gets wet, it doesn't dry. Is that the only case, or does mold grow? Help me understand this, because I clearly don't know enough about it, of why this is so vitally important that we take care of this in our houses now.
So put it this way, your home is nothing but soil. It's a beautiful piece of soil. The walls are freshly painted. There's nice cabinetry. Everything is beautiful. But think of it as soil. Think of mold, the spores itself, as seeds. So every day we're going to open windows, open doors. We're going to go grocery shopping, come back to our house. we're going to have some seeds already in our environment. You can't avoid that. The problem is that when our building gets wet, now that soil has the moisture it needs for those seeds to start to grow. That's what ends up happening. And now all of a sudden, our beautiful home, our beautiful canvas becomes this moldy nightmare over time as different spots of soil get the moisture that it needs for these seeds to become full-on weeds. We're going to call them weeds, not flowers, for this reference. That's really what takes shape, right? So we always have a normal amount of mold in our environment, and a normal amount of mold becomes abnormal when water enters the equation, coming into contact with building materials it's not supposed to, and then providing this opportunity for mold to start to take over. And the scary thing about this is that this can all be happening behind your walls and you have no idea. It could be behind the ceiling or in the HVAC. That's why it's important to test and not guess.
And are there like any lesser known places mold can happen? I know you mentioned the ice cube machine. So when cleaning out an ice cube machine, what does one do for that? How often? I think on your Instagram, which is amazing, and we'll put all the, all of your links in the show notes, because I've learned so much just from following you, but you also talk about coffee machines. So are there other places besides those two? And, let's say Gywneth Paltrow's underneath her bathtub, but any other places that mold grows that we should maybe start thinking about?
Coffee machines are a big one. Especially there are some machines that probably cost more that are made with more antimicrobial materials, which helps a lot. But most of them, your standard $100 to $200 coffee machines, they're going to be made with cheaper plastics that unfortunately do get moldy if they are not maintained well enough. And what does it need? It needs moisture. Unfortunately, coffee machines are going to have an abundance of moisture because you need to put water in there to make the coffee. So you should be cleaning out that reservoir. They're going to have rubber gaskets too, which basically start and stop the flow of water when the coffee machine is actively working. Those rubber gaskets, if the best machines are ones you can take apart and clean really well, because you're going to clean all the old coffee grinds out of there. You're going to want to, make sure that they're fully dry every once in a while. I'm not saying you need to do this every single day, every time you make a cup of coffee, but once a week, you really need to give everything a good cleaning. Your front-loading washing machines, they're America's most popular washing machine because it looks nice, but they each have a rubber gasket at the front that folds over and it traps moisture all the time and gets all moldy. And if you ever wonder why your clothes smell moldy, if you have a front-loading washing machine, that's why. Every once in a while, we have to really clean that rubber gasket. I always recommend, if you have one, open the front door after you're done washing the laundry so you can let it air dry. Because when the door's closed, you don't really have that capability. Or just don't buy one. Like in my house, we have a top loader. It doesn't look as nice, but you know what? Form over function here. We also have issues with pretty much any watered appliance, right? Dishwashers can be another culprit, especially in that filter where the filter is. Most people don't even know that dishwashers have a filter.
I did
it's
not.
It's at the very, very bottom. There's usually a little circle drain, if you will. And if you unscrew that, you'll pop out a filter. Cleaning in that cavity, changing the filter when it needs to be changed, cleaning the filter, all those things are important. And unfortunately, they get neglected. It's really funny because when you buy a home and when you buy all these things, like there's no real like manual to home ownership or being a renter. All these things you have to think about. We just kind of go for it, right? And these are some of the things that we really need to learn along the way. Otherwise, these little problems take shape. Inside of homes, kitchens and bathrooms are pretty obvious where there's moisture. Less obvious is like basements and crawl spaces because they are subgrade, so they're always prone to moisture, but not a lot of people are thinking about that, especially if they've never seen standing water. So we want to, kind of look at those spaces, make sure they're free of mold and bacteria, get dehumidifiers if we need them, things of that nature. Attics with roof leaks are probably another one, or improper ventilation, poor insulation, things of that nature. So that pretty much rounds out the house stuff. The other really crazy thing is sippy cups, baby bottles. These are things that, unfortunately, if you don't get stuff that you could take apart and clean properly, you get mold growth. A lot of these new cups, they're marketed to parents that want to have spill-proof stuff, which is great. I certainly understand that. I have 2 kids myself, and they make messes all the time. So less mess is great. However, the technology in a lot of these spill-proof stuff means there's silicone parts. Essentially, they're stopping the water from coming out unless there's suction. Well, what happens there is that, again, it traps moisture because it's literally designed to trap moisture. And if you don't take those things apart, it's really annoying. But like, we have a bunch of those, and we have to actually pull the silicone pieces off the plastic and wash them separately, and then make sure that they dry separately. Otherwise, you'll get really gross stuff in there. And bath toys are gross.
So, I feel like I'm being schooled as you are talking about this. I have my big thing. It's like spill proof, and I put it in the dishwasher. But as you're talking about like the silicone on that, I'm like, oh shit. So when it comes to cleaning things like this, so something, like a sippy cup or just, the tumbler that I have, is taking it apart and putting it in the dishwasher going to be good enough? Or do I need to, manually, physically go and like properly do that?
Not unless you want to. The dishwasher works fine.
Okay.
You definitely, but the key is you want to take these things apart and then put them in the dishwasher with its separate pieces, as opposed to just like throwing the whole thing. Like this one sippy cup we have, it's like a cap, and it's a white cap, and it's got like a green or pink, depending on if it's for Mason or Olivia, silicone cap. Okay. And it's actually really difficult to get off, but you have to pull it off. And so every time we're doing the dishes, I have to like literally pry this thing off and then put them separately. If I just put the whole cap with the plastic and the silicone, 100% within a week, that thing would be disgustingly moldy or be ridden with bacteria. So it's really important that you take those pieces apart before you throw them in the dishwasher.
So fascinating. I mean, so when it comes to all the different things in our house, we have an abundance of appliances, machines, things of that nature. I'd love to know more about formaldehydes, and you started talking about mycotoxins.
Mycotoxins.
Yeah. And so I'd like to know more about that and certain products that people are buying, maybe for the holidays, for afterwards, health-related things that we should be concerned about, that maybe it's not mold per se, but it's bad stuff in the actual products.
Yeah. So probably the 2 biggest contributors to poor air quality from that side of the fence is going to be VOCs and formaldehyde. And formaldehyde is in so many different products that we buy. It's in makeup. It's in your wood floors. It's in, furniture. And it doesn't need to be, right? It's think of it from like an asbestos perspective, where manufacturers use certain things to make their products more resilient or stand the test of time. But then we learn later on, like, okay, those things are not great for our health. And then we go on this radical change where, just like asbestos, we remove asbestos from everything. We need to do that with formaldehyde as well. Formaldehyde is something that causes all kinds of different effects. And of course, everything in life, quantity matters, right? So some products might have formaldehyde, but they're low. Some products might be off the charts high. As a matter of fact, FEMA, for example, they come in after like natural disasters all over the country. And what they'll actually do is they'll set up mobile homes for people that lost everything in a flood or a hurricane. And they actually have to test those mobile homes, and they tell people, this home has high formaldehyde, but it's all we have. So come in at your own risk. And they make people sign waivers because they know it's a problem, and it's in a lot of products that get shipped in from overseas. It was even in, the magic eraser that we all love and love and hold dear to
Really?
us.
And so just to interrupt quickly, formaldehyde, like, why is it used? What is it for? Why is it in so many products if it's so bad?
Well, it's like, remember BPA, right? BPA in plastics. It's like we figure out something's not great for us and we just develop a cousin to it. And we use an alternative to it. But the problem, I think, with really, this is an American problem because most of the world has formaldehyde regulations already. Uh, in America, we tend to just let people put stuff in things without asking any questions. And then what ends up happening is we get data later because typically some sort of nonprofit or something or other discovers, does the research, figures out things, certain products are not good for us, certain chemicals or compounds are not good for us, shares that, and then they, give companies time to figure out an alternative solution. It's kind of backwards to me. To me, we should be like, you want to use this? Okay, good. Do studies to show how the effects that this is going to have on people before you can do it. And listen, I'm not saying that everyone's going to be super honest with their studies unless they're done by like a third party accredited, agency. But the reality of it is, even that, just that one measure could help us change the game. Why do we use these things? To make our products more resilient, to last longer. Sometimes it's to help with certain flame retardant needs that we have on certain products due to various fire codes. There are so many different variables on why we use what we use, but the reality of it is it's a cheaper alternative for people to meet certain requirements in different products. Usually it has to do with either shelf life or some sort of environmental or fire code that they have to comply with. And I think that's where we get into a lot of trouble. VOCs, the volatile organic compounds, it's in pretty much every paint, any adhesive where things have to cure. It is the particles that literally off gas as the product is drying or curing. But some products take a year to fully cure, right? And so, we have this situation where we could be off-gassing a lot of particles that our immune system, by the way, has to filter through and get out of us. And this is where we start to see a whole host of issues. Now, in my experience, it's typically like a toxic soup type of situation where we have high levels of VOCs, high levels of formaldehyde, we have mold, we have bacteria, and it's just like we don't have a standing chance at that point. But, I think from a healthy home perspective, the goal is, how can I be reasonable with the decisions that I make? And I think that's the goal. I don't necessarily need to have everything formaldehyde free because I think I would go crazy if I did. But when I'm looking at surface area, like I'm going to want formaldehyde free flooring because it covers a huge square footage. I'm going to want VOC free painting because covers such a square footage, but I'm not looking at every single caulk and every single screw and every single this and that, because I think I would go nuts. I would probably drive whatever contractors that I'm working with nuts. And of course, everything would be a specialty order. It would be unreasonable to try to get every single thing, because if you end up needing one more screw or one more tube of caulk and you're trying to renovate your home or build a home, that's it. You're now stuck waiting 6-8 weeks for it to come in, right? And so I always tell people, creating a healthy home, there's no perfect science to this. It's about making the best decisions that one can make, just like when we deal with our health, right? There's no perfect science to it. We have to make the best decisions that we can, forgive ourselves when we make mistakes, and just learn to do better a higher percentage of the time.
So with that being said then, and this is going to be a more general question just for everyone listening, of 5 tips, whether it's remove these products or get this product formaldehyde free, like where should someone start and look for? Like, I would say personally, tip number 1, go look at your, the toilet underneath the lid. That would be one that I've taken away from this. But what would you say are like the top 5 things that you want people to know about their houses that they can go do or implement or buy or change out today?
So Tip number one is take air quality seriously. A lot of people listening to this, probably the first time it's ever crossed their mind. And that's okay. I'm glad that it's crossing your mind now. But let it cross your mind. Go, if you could afford it, go pick up a test to test your dust. It's a couple $100. It's invaluable because it can really arm you with information. Information is how we make decisions. Step two, I think looking at, okay, we want to make better decisions with air quality. Good. Well, number one thing that you can do is protect your HVAC system. It is the lungs of your home, and it greatly affects the air quality that you're breathing. Most of us, there's what's called a MERV rating, and it's an efficiency rating for filters. Most of us have anywhere from a MERV 8 to a 13. None of those are going to be efficient enough to remove small particles like mold or bacteria at a high of enough rate. So I think instantly we can upgrade to the highest we can get in a residential setting is MERV 16. That would be invaluable. You can get down to 7 nanometers at that size, and that's really, really important because now we're getting into removing even some viruses from the air. The other thing is cleaning. Cleaning is really important. So if you remember step one, I said, test your dust. Well, that should give you a clue. Our dust is going to contain all kinds of crap like, particles, toxins, mold, bacteria. And so when we let dust accumulate in our environments, unfortunately, we're also letting that stuff get into our body much easier and faster. So cleaning is really important. Removing these dust particles as they accumulate is going to be key. Step 4 is going to help you with step 3 with better filtration of your HVAC and, getting some air purifiers. You'll reduce the amount of cleaning needed because they're going to be helping you clean the air as these particles do get aerosolized. So that's definitely a tip that I would recommend. And I think step 5 is probably going to have to do with just making the best choices you can make. There's a lot about air quality that you can learn if you start to go down that rabbit hole. And, I don't want anyone ever to feel defeated if they can't do every little thing. And I think that's really important. Now, do the best you can. And just doing anything, if you've never done anything before, you're already a giant leap ahead. And I think it's really important to know that because, sometimes you need a renovation if you find you have a big mold or bacteria problem, which could be costly. And if you can't afford to do that right away, well, then what you really should look at is what can I afford to make a transformation? Because doing nothing is not going to be the right answer either.
Those are great. And I love that you broke them down. And as you were actually just saying that last one of do what you can, make it simple, which I love. I was just thinking about my apartment, and I can only imagine if I, went to my landlord and said, hey, I've tested for mold, it's here. It's probably a pretty big cost because there's clearly a leak. This has happened. We have the photos of it. And I can just imagine her saying, well, no, I don't want to do it because of the cost involved with that. So let's say someone does have mold and for whatever reason, they are unable to attack the entire problem. Or in my example, like, let's say my landlord is just going to say no. What simple tip would you say to deal with it then? And do we bring in an air? I mean, you did mention air purifiers. Is there a certain air purifier that you think everyone should have in their house? Is there something else that you could do if you know that you have mold, but you just for whatever reason can't deal with it right now?
Yeah, I think fresh air exchange is going to be really key. If you can't deal with it right now, maybe financially or maybe just logistically, you can't deal with it till next summer, right? Well, you want to have a means of having relief in the interim. Getting fresh air exchange in there is going to be key because you're going to dilute the amount of particles that you're breathing in. You could even further dilute it by removing particles in the environment. So if I know I had like a leaking window, I'm going to stick an air purifier right by that window. Because what it's going to do is as the particles are being released by that window, it's going to be picking it up and filtering it out. And what you'll notice is, I bet when you look at that filter, some filters can last 3 months, some filters last a year. I bet you doesn't last as long because of the amount of particles that it's going to be picking up over time. But just doing little things like that, staying on top of cleaning. I might clean a little more frequently than I normally would because I know there's an issue. But yeah, there are things that you can do, of course, to find some relief. And the best thing you can do is get the data to really understand what's there and how much is there and how that might be impacting, your health piece of the puzzle. And doing those things until you can, figure out a better situation, I think is at least something you can do. That's paramount.
I love it. And I love that that would be my biggest concern, right? Is not being able to deal with the problem as it is. But what I'm hearing you say is definitely cleaning. And I'm going to add in using non-toxic cleaning products and as often as possible, vacuuming, things of that nature, opening your windows, as we talked about. Michael, this has been, incredibly enlightening for me. And just as you said, I don't believe that we know enough about this. And something that I found during the pandemic was so many people just kind of blindly trusted the government for everything, for all different things that were said or not said. And I feel like we're at this time in this day and age where it's like, we really do have to take our health into our own hands because, as you're saying, with the EPA's two reports, there's so many things that we don't know until years later. And so my last question for you is, what is one last thing that you want someone to take away from listening to this podcast today?
I think that for so many families that I've helped, thousands of families at this point, and seeing what they're going through from a health perspective and how, just making some simple changes, some way larger changes, but just watching them transform their health in the process has been really not only gratifying, but just earth shattering for me to see. I got into this whole field after Hurricane Sandy happened in the Northeast, where I'm originally from. And, just the amount of people getting sick after being in such a water damaged area. It was the first time that I ever realized, wow, our homes have this profound impact on our health. And I think so many people have no idea of that. We've been just kind of trained that if you have symptoms, you need to just go to the doctor and take a prescription, which masks the symptoms, right? Instead of really getting down to root cause of issues. And so I think we really need a paradigm shift here. We need to look at what is wrong with our bodies? Why are our bodies not thriving? Why did last year, for the first time in a really long time, our longevity reversed? The amount of life that we live had reversed and declined after it's been inclining for so many years. These are questions that I think we don't get down to the bottom of unless we transform the way we think. And I hope that people really do that because, for far too long, you've said it earlier, we've just blindly trusted doctors and government officials. And look, doctors and government officials are people like you and me. And, they might be experts in a particular arena, but I can tell you firsthand, an expert cannot be an expert in everything. It's impossible. And so you'll find that's why doctors might be foot experts or knee experts or this expert or that expert, or a general doctor that might know enough general things. The problem is that, in this world, we have a lot of science and we have a lot of anatomy of bodies and medical science and medical journals and literature that a person could never learn it all. And that's why it's so important for us to educate ourselves and empower ourselves to look for answers and make decisions that are right for us. And so,
amen to that. Amen. So, where can people find you? Where do you want to direct them after listening to this incredible interview?
Go to HomeCleanse.com. It's like the hub. On there, you could find my personal website, all my social media stuff. If you want to learn more, I do a lot of fun and interesting posts on all the different things of air quality that you can learn. And so if you just go there, you'll find everything.
Amazing. Well, thank you so much, Michael. Enlightening for me is truly, as soon as we hang up this call, I'm going to my toilets and I'll let you know what I find. Hopefully nothing. But I just want to say thank you so much. I will link everything in the show notes. And thank you for being a listener. If you found this useful, helpful, or you know someone that could benefit from listening to this episode, please do share it with them. And until next week, here's to a sharper life.